Sydney. My name is Peter Boyle, and I'll be emceeing today's session. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting here today on the land of the Gadigal people, as the indigenous people of this land, who have never actually ceded control of this country. It was taken by force from them, and we have to pay respects to their elders, past and present. Our guest speaker today, I think, is a very interesting fellow. I would say, you could say he's classed as one of the official subversive people, both in Malaysia it seems, but for a while it looked like even in Australia. I mean, far be it from us to have to apologize for the Australian Department of Immigration for initially refusing him the visa to this country. But I think it was a bit rich for them to knock him back in the first instance, just on the basis that he was subversive in Malaysia, that they presumed that he might have an interest in coming here and applying for asylum. I think this says more about the rather peculiar sensitivities of some people in Australia. You know, it comes a bit with what I said earlier. When you live in a land that is stolen, you get very protective, and you don't want other people to come and share your stolen goods. Yeah. Okay, maybe that's going to... Well, Haris Ibrahim, I think you could say he has been a long time activist for democracy and for change in Malaysia. He was a lawyer for some 20 years, and then, in his own words, he got sick of saying "Milord, Milord" and bowing and scraping to these people, and decided to put his main efforts into fighting for real change in Malaysia. And he has been involved in many civil society organizations. I suppose among them, he said the closest to his heart is Anak Bangsa Movement, Malaysia, and Anything But UMNO movement, and many other organizations, including the People's Parliament. I think what he has to say today to us will be very interesting, because those of us here who have been gathering around in the name of Bersih over the last couple of years, paying a lot of attention and looking with great interest on the transformations, the popular transformations that were beginning in Malaysia, are wanting to hear from somebody who can explain, now that the elections, the 13th general elections are over, what is happening to the movement? And this is what we are looking for some insight from Haris Ibrahim today. Now, we'll give him his say, and no doubt he will say some pretty interesting things, as he always does. But he said he would really like to have an engagement with the audience. So there'll be time for questions and answers afterwards. But before I pass on to Haris Ibrahim, I want to make an appeal for two things. First of all, if you haven't already, please make a contribution towards the cost of hiring this venue. It's a lovely venue, but it cost us about $300, and we have to make it up. We don't have any wealthy backers here. So there's a little box that's outside there, and I think it's going to be passed around during the meeting. If you haven't put something in, please be generous and put anything that's left over. We'll pass with Haris Ibrahim to take back to the movement in Malaysia. And secondly, the Bersih Sydney Committee would like to ask if you are interested to be involved and find out about future activities, please leave us your email address. And a little sticker pad will be going around. And even if you think that we already have your email address, we are less than superbly organized, give it again just in case that we lost it. Okay? So, okay, without any further ado. Oh yes, one final housekeeping, very, very important. Condition of hiring this hall is that we leave it in a very clean state, and particularly take all the drinks containers and drinks out with you when you come out. Also, the drinks out there, I think it was $2 a pop. If you didn't put the money in for him, please put it in as well. So, without further ado, Haris Ibrahim, come and tell us your story.
Good afternoon, and God's peace be with all of you. Thank you for taking time out from your weekend to be here to hear me and perhaps share your own thoughts. I want to put a context to what I'm about to say this evening, and maybe I can take the cue from the first refusal of the visa. I sought an appointment to meet the High Commission officers to address the concerns that appeared in the record of decision, which basically said this, that because of the pending charge, the fact that I was on bail, and that I was not in gainful employment, the concern was that I did not have sufficient incentive to return or to leave Australia after I concluded my business. Now, two things. First, I explained to them that the reason I was not in gainful employment was that I had ceased practice, legal practice, in 2010 of my own choice. And it was with a view to giving all of my time to the efforts of the last 2 years to remove UMNO Barisan Nasional. So I was not in gainful employment by choice. Now, as to whether I might not return, I asked them to understand this, that I ceased a lucrative practice because 40% of the Malaysians live in abject poverty, and that efforts had to be made in order to begin to alleviate their lives. I said there was no way I would not be going home because I would not abandon my people. That was my explanation, simpliciter, to the High Commission. And I'm here today to reiterate that I will not abandon my people. Now, they say UMNO BN won the 13th general election. Canberra Times, I think on the 26th of last month, in castigating Prime Minister Abbott for his apology to the Malaysian government for his previous criticisms while in opposition, hit the nail on the head. They said the Najib administration won the election on a gerrymander. Now, you only understand this if you analyze the results. Sure, they took 48% of the popular vote, as opposed to Pakatan's 51. That's bad enough. But the story gets worse, my friends. We have 222 parliamentary seats. In order to obtain a simple majority government, you need 112 seats. If you analyze the seats that they took, BN won 112 seats by merely garnering 20% of the votes cast. That is the extent of the gerrymander that the Canberra Times alluded to. Now, this is what we are confronted with at home, the reality. And it is in this context, I ask you to consider this. 2007, November, I was on the streets, the first Bersih rally. By 2011, the second rally, I was already on the steering committee, 150,000 on the streets, demanding for electoral reforms. Last year, April, the third rally, by our estimates, and it's fairly accurate, some 250,000 to 300,000 on the streets. If you were UMNO Barisan Nasional, or if you were advising them, would you give us the reforms that the people are demanding? Yes. Would you? No. You'd be stark, raving mad, because it would be tantamount to signing your own death warrant. And that's the reality we confront today. Yes, we won with wholesale cheating. I was part of the Abu Covert operation when we went to KLIA and we intercepted, well, we couldn't stop, but we were able to note Malindo unscheduled chartered flights coming in, carrying Nepali workers, palm oil estate workers from Sabah being flown in. some of our Abu volunteers were able to interview them. And they confirmed that they were oil palm workers. They were told to fly to Kuala Lumpur, destination unknown. Doesn't make sense if you're a foreign worker being moved from one estate to the other. They were picked up by government agency vehicles, RISDA. We tailed them and it was a cat and mouse game. They'd stop for 20 minutes and wait for us to move on and we wouldn't. And then they'd move on again for another 200 yards and stop again by the side and we do the same. They pulled into a lay-by, there were 2 tour buses waiting. We did the same. Finally the tour buses gave up and drove off. 2 vans with 1 car in pursuit, they got smart. They split 2 ways. We had to choose, follow one. But the explanations that came from the Najib administration that these were foreign workers being brought in to be deployed in other estates didn't wash with us. On polling day, yes, a lot of people said the Abu message to the foreigners who were given my cards and put on the electoral roll was a bit harsh. It was a bit harsh. Why? Because we threatened to beat their brains in if we saw them polling there at the polling stations. But friends, my own experience was this. It had the effect of keeping a large number away. And that's all we wanted. I mean, I'm not a violent man and neither are the Abu volunteers. But the main idea was if they feared enough, they would not show up. And to that extent, we were able to curb some of that cheating. Honestly though, it was a case of too little, too late. And in that sense, I must concede that Abu's efforts running into the 13th general election were insufficient. But that is only half the story. BN cheated, Abu, yes, right strategy. I think we were onto the right strategy, but it came too little and too late. But another factor, and this is something that perhaps will not go down too well with some of you, the opposition let us down. I say this for this reason. For a whole year leading up to GE13, we begged, we implored that for once they should stop being leaders of their party and instead be leaders of the people. We implored the leaders, especially in Sabah and Sarawak. The mood for change on the ground was so strong. So strong that, if you will remember, in December 2011, Musa Ahmad's government barred me from entering Sabah. Because we had been going to the heartlands, we had been going to the most remote areas, taking the most difficult message. And I can tell you, my own experience, people wanted change. But their one concern that they kept voicing to us over and over again, if there were 3, 4, 5, 6 cornered contests, BN would win again. History has shown us this. Go to the book, the Batu Sapi by-election. Ansari from PKR, Yong Teck Lee from SABP could not come to a consensus. They shook hands, gentlemen's agreement. They would not mudsling each other. It lasted less than 24 hours. The mudslinging started the day after. Linda Sen roamed home. Now, this replicated in the 13th general election. On nomination day, we saw so many 3, 4, 5, 6 cornered contests in Sabah. We knew Sabah was a lost cause. Our intelligence reports, if we got it right, we would be able to take 8 of the 31 seats from Sarawak. And if you know the logistical nightmare in Sarawak, taking 8 is a damn good job. We managed 6. And I'll tell you, that 6 was won on a hard-fought wicket. Sabah, 25 seats. Our intelligence reports get it right, and we take 14. We only managed 3. Sabah let us down. But it's not just the Sabah leaders. The opposition in toto failed to get their act together, failed to unite all opposing forces to take on Barisan Nasional. Now, what have we seen post 13 GE? I call this an increasing, and it's increasing at a dangerous level, state-sponsored polarization. Look at the Allah issue. Now, the Allah issue is one thing, but the fact that the decision, the delivery of the decision by the court was set for the eve of the Hari Raya Haji holidays. That was mischievous. That was mischievous. The continuous rhetoric we hear about how the Chinese are forever challenging the special rights of the Malays. Now, I pause here to touch on two things. Special rights. Friends, the Constitution does not provide for special rights. Article 153 talks about special position. And what does it say? It says, the Agong, His Majesty, shall safeguard the special position of the Malays, the indigenous of Sabah and Sarawak, and the legitimate interests of the other communities. It does not confer rights on anyone. It places a duty on the king to strike this fine balancing act in the measuring out of an affirmative program. Go to the Reid Commission report. The commission that actually drafted and finally gave this document. And they recommended that Article 153 be reviewed within 15 years. It was never intended to be forever. Now, I've again and again gone to the opposition party leaders and said, we need to take this message to the Malays. They need to be told that in the founding document, there was never an intention to create a super race called the Malayu. And my response again and again is, Haris, you are right. But this is not the right time. My friends, there will never be a right time. Because being the politicians that they are, it is always about first getting into power and then consolidating themselves there. And it can never be in their interest to share a difficult message to the Malay populace. But this is a message that needs to be taken to ground. If we are ever to take this country back on track in the direction that our forefathers intended, one nation, one people, all equal. Nothing else was intended but that. You need to look at the statements of the sultans in those early days, that these early exceptional provisions they hoped would one day be displaced with a nation of equal people. That was the aspiration of the forefathers. We keep seeing an escalation of the race-religion rhetoric. It's more religion today than race, because increasingly UMNO finds it is losing its vice grip on the Malays in the urban areas. Why? The Malays in the urban areas have access to the alternative news. The uncles and aunties in the heartlands, on the other hand, are on a daily basis given a small dose of arsenic poisoning with the Utusan Malaysia in the morning after his morning prayers, and primetime news at 8, TV3 and RTN. They know they've lost their grip on the Malay minds in the urban areas. Their hold is still with the Malays in the rural. But they also are aware that even with the urban Malay, Islam still cuts with him. And if you can forge a Bible issue suggesting Islam is under siege, that the God of the Muslims is being hijacked by the Catholics, you can win them over again. So this is what we are witnessing today. If you ask me, these are the desperate acts of a dying tiger. My job, and the job of many at home, is to strike the fatal blow, to put this dying, wounded tiger out of its misery. And also to end the misery of 40% of Malaysians who continue to languish in poverty. How do we do this? As I said, I believe the ABU strategy running into GE13 was spot on. We have a media battle on our hands. Now, 1.5 years running into GE13, our ABU efforts, at best, we would be able to get videos, print material into the Malay heartlands. And I underscore this, that has to be the target audience today. We have to be more specific. The 20% who delivered the 112 seats, we need to identify them right down to their postal address. And we need to work on them over the next few years. But here comes the problem. As I said, running into the 13 GE, we delivered videos, we delivered DVDs, we delivered print material, but the regularity was something like maybe once a month at best. And most times, 2 months once. It is impossible to beat Utusan and TV3 at their game when they take that poison in on a daily basis. You can't beat that. It's impossible. And you know, as the media people will tell you, repeat a lie oft enough, it becomes the gospel truth. So when Pak Ali in the kampung reads Utusan front lines, and it says, I translate for the benefit of those who do not understand the Malay language, the rights of the Malays are being challenged. Ali turns to Asing. This is in the rural, he says, Asing, what's going on? Asing says, you know, city folk. Now, it doesn't affect race relations. And that's my sense. We do not have a race relations problem on the ground. UMNO, BN would like us to believe that that's a serious problem. We do not have a race relations problem on the ground, but that constant siege of the Malay mind has this effect. He makes a mental note, come the GE, give his vote to UMNO. And that's all they want. Understand that, that is all they want. They do not want to see a nation in flames. By golly, no, they want to rape the bloody economy. And that's not going to happen if you have the nation in siege. So that's not the end game. The end game is to do enough to have the Alis, the Abus, and the Ahmads giving UMNO the vote. Now that's the first task that ABU has. That is to go into the kampungs with a constant message. And the 3 messages that I would like to take into the kampungs is this. We've actually begun this process of taking this message in 2011 with a documentary called The End, BN, which really means the end of BN. Kuburkan BN, bury BN, DPRI 13, bury BN at the 13 GE. It was a 1 hour 40-minute documentary. 3 core messages. The first, that the real history of this country has so long been buried. UMNO were not the champions of Merdeka. It was the left wing. It was the Burhanuddin Helmis. It was the Tan Cheng Locks. It was the many in the trade unions. These were the real champions that fought for independence. UMNO then was a British contrivance to replace the heroes of the day, the communists. The communists were the ones who fought the Japanese. It was a British contrivance. And it was an effort to maintain the status quo of the aristocracy, the Malay aristocracy. That's not changed. Today, the aristocracies are replaced by the cronies. Now, that message is the first we take to the Malays. The second, that there is no ketuanan Melayu in Islam. Islam cannot countenance any notions of race supremacy. And we want to confront the Malays with this issue. Are you Muslim or are you a bigoted Malaysian? Choose. Finally, and this is the key, that the new economic policy launched in 1973 and post-Tun Razak, particularly starting with Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, has been used as the platform to contend that they protect the rights of the Malays, when in fact it is they themselves that rape and rob the Malays blind. Now, these key messages, as I said in 2011, we launched it with some 200,000 copies of DVDs taken into the heartland. And my experience was, it resonated. But you send those messages in and for 2 months, they hear nothing of you. Meanwhile, every day it's Utusan TV3, Utusan TV3, and we lose the battle. If we are to make any sense and to have a better chance of leveling the playing field or the electoral field for the 14GE, we need to take a sustained media war. Once in 2 months won't do. I am looking to see if we cannot set up an internet TV station. Your question, of course, is going to be, Haris, there's no internet in the villages. Yes, the penetration, there is penetration, but it is not anything close to what we have in the urban areas.
What about Radio Bangsa?
I'll take that during Q&A. But what you can do is this. You have news, internet news, then you burn those news programs on DVDs and you take them into the villages. It's doable. Radio Free Sarawak, to my mind, Claire Rucastle's initiative and effort was formidable, but it had an impact. We must understand, though, that in the longhouses, for many of them, radio is a primary mode of communication and for news receiving. For the rest of us, myself included, the only time I listen to the radio is when I'm stuck in the traffic jam. So it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So we're thinking internet TV news, burn those news reports, and they get carried into the Malay heartlands, at least once a week. And what we can then do is, the blue-collar workers in the city go back once a month after they get their pay packet. Encourage them, burn, take home. People go back for the festival holidays, the Hari Raya, the Chinese New Year, the Deepavali. Encourage them to burn and take it home. And this, I think, is probably the most viable chance of taking that media war to the UMNO BN mainstream media. We need to break UMNO's hold on the mind of the Malay. Many who have left Malaysia, Australia, and a whole host of other countries, yes, you have felt that your nation of birth treated you like second-class citizens, and there seemed no reason to stay. Let me share with you Section 12 of the Sharia, in brackets, Criminal Law Offences Act 1997. This is for Wilayah Persekutuan. And this is what it says in substance. It is an offence to hold an opinion contrary to fatwa. Sir, you laugh. I know, it sounds hilarious. It sounds hilarious. But what it means is this. If that donkey Harusani, the Mufti of Perak, contrives with the other muftis and comes up with a fatwa, I'm not even allowed to hold a view contrary to that edict. In that context, if you felt you were second-class citizens, the Malay Muslims are third class in Malaysia. They cannot think. That's a frightening proposition. Now, that is the Malay mind shackled today 20%. We can have a 14, then a 15, then a 16 GE. It won't change. It won't change. We need to get in, we need to unlock those minds. And it's not difficult. Because, contrary to what some may think, it's about having enough common sense. And my experience has been this. I've been working on the ground the last 2 years, working in the Malay heartlands. Give them the truth that we have, the information that we have, that they are now denied. And my friends, they will come to the same conclusion as you and I. And that is this: UMNO BN must be buried if we are to save this nation. But they need to receive that information. We deliver that information, and God willing, we may have just done enough to set their minds free so that they will break the gerrymander. They will break the gerrymander. End of this year, December, redelineation is planned for. There are NGOs working in Kuala Lumpur who will work to contrive and to obtain the necessary number of constituents to lodge protests so that the protest and procedure mechanism kicks in. But that, at best, is a delaying exercise. They will endeavor to push the new redelineations through. I have no inkling what is in store. Now, or Taiwan, or US or the UK, get used to this. Wake up to this. You've been laughing at the Thai and the Indons and the Filipina girls who come here. Guess what? Your daughters are going to be doing the same. And this is a reality that we need to take home. Now, that's one possible scenario. People say, Haris, you are too much of a pessimist. You are too radical. You're forever talking about taking power on the streets. I want nothing better, my friends, like the rest of you, than to just stay at home with my family and get on with my family life. But we need to look at the stark reality. And the stark reality is this. In 1974, government statistics, 50% poor. 1974, very important, Petronas created. Malaysia joined the ranks of oil-producing nations. Fast forward to 2009, 35 years. We do not have exact figures because Tengku Razali saw fit in creating Petronas to provide that accounts would only be tabled before the Prime Minister. So to this date, we do not know how much has been taken. But Barry Wayne, in his book, what's the title of the book? Nation Maverick. From the figures that we've been able to cull from that book, in that 35 years, some 2 to 3 trillion from the oil and gas industry entered federal coffers. Now, they would have us believe that 1974, 50% poor. In 2010, they have done a successful job and the poverty level is down to 6%. My friends, they tweak and they play with the poverty line indicator. They arrive at 6% because they tell us if you are in Kuala Lumpur with a family of 5, on a household income of 764 ringgit, you are not poor. That's insane. A family of 5 in Kuala Lumpur with 764 ringgit is destitute. Now take it up to a more realistic figure of 1,005 and we are back to 40% impoverished. And I ask you, where is the money that they took that ought to have been applied to the poor and the impoverished? We do not have hospitals, we do not have class universities, we do not have class teachers, we do not have good teachers. Why? Because We have been robbed blind. And this must stop. They will never give up power because there is still so much to take. Now, me and my friends, and many of us could pack our bags, get on a plane, and join you good folk here in Australia, and say, well, bugger them at home. Well, I've got now for 1 year. Okay? So I can be back again next week. And that's what we could do. But we're not going to. We're not going to. And if we cannot level the electoral playing field, then by golly, and by God's will, we will endeavor to take it on the streets. Because there may be no other way. That's the truth that's slowly coming home to roost. We are peace-loving, but the most peace-loving people have a breaking point. Push us too far. People said, Haris, your message to Najib went a bit too far. What did I say? I just asked him whether he was ready to die. Was he ready to die? Because many of us are ready to die to defend motherland. Now, maybe I want to end on this note. How far have I gone?
It's about right.
Just about right. I finished my talk in Canberra on the 28th, and I had a lovely brainstorm with 4 or 5 young Malaysians. And one of them then asked me this. They said, Haris, how do we begin to forge racial unity? And I said, I think the problem lies in your question. Because you're still focused on race. When you talk about racial unity, you're still focused on race. I shared with him this, and you'll forgive me if I break down, because it's painful. In 2007, we had a spate of Hindu temple demolishments in Kuala Lumpur. And I saw this footage of a young boy, 7, 8, 9, walking through the rubble of what once was his temple. He walked through the rubble. Then he picked up what remained of Ganesha. And I continue to remember this because I asked, how do we expect him to grow up and love this country? It is not about racial unity. It is about inculcating a sense of patriotism. It is about inculcating a sense of I belong. That this country embraces me. Now, this is what we need to go back to. And this is what Saya Anak Bangsa Malaysia was set up for, in order to take us back on that hard journey. We've been set back, but it's never too late. Now, Abu, for me, is that short spurt of energy that we need in order to enable Saya Anak Bangsa Malaysia to plod and on that long journey to achieving one nation, one people, we are all equal. And that remains the aspirations of my friends and I back home. That is the message I bring here to you. And I honestly hope that many of you out here may still feel that there might still be something good in Malaysia to try to rescue. Now, on that note, I will stop here. Thank you for listening. I hope to hear from you now.
All speech with Adil Adam and Ken Chua and a few others. The whole paranoia, they will associate you with taking power. you know, and that's why you have quit Bersih, who will continue to take a reformist line, right? Therefore, yes, it is good that you have said that you are going to go to the kampong, de-brainwash the pakcik and memakcik, but the state apparatus is very mindful and will do any attempts to stop you using people like Perkasa and others. And the thing I was trying to ask you about, you talk about Claire Newcastle, a successful Radio Sarawak one. I think she started Radio Free Malaysia. How successful is that? And couldn't we have like apa ini? Ishamuddin Rais, a friend of mine, not the politician, the radical guy, informing Radio Bangsa. Couldn't we extend a network where the rakyat can listen in whatever, you know, Malay, Chinese, or in that kind of language?
Another two more. Yes.
I'm just wondering if, in terms of getting support from the ground level, we've got a huge population of Malaysians here, plus supporters from BlackOut, supporters for a better country in the future. What about the population of Malaysians living in Singapore? I understand there's up to 700 of them living there. And what do you see the future of having to do that sort of support for you?
Thanks, Tony. And one more?
I'm interested in what you say about getting into the Malay heartland. I think I would venture to say a little bit further that the objective is to, more like Abu, removing them from having any handshakes with UMNO. This does not include just the Malays. The Chinese, the Indians, so on, just as bad. So would your program include reforming the Chinese and the Indians and the other non-Malays into thinking the same way what you propose them to be?
Okay, Harris?
Yeah. Well, I quit Bersih, and thanks for the question because it helps me to take a point that I wanted to take with you all. I quit Bersih after Bersih 2. That was the 9th of July. And I'm going to be very candid with you why I left. I never asked for this position of a civil society leader. It's been lumbered on me. But even as I accept that role, I think I have a moral duty to be honest with those on the ground. Now, by 2.0, it became clear to me that UMNO Barisan Nasional was not going to give us any of the reforms. I mean, they can't. Indelible ink, 2007, 2008, 11th hour, they did an about turn. They can't. Take away the scope for one person voting twice, and they're not able to win the seats that they've set out to win. Clean up the electoral roll. It's never going to happen. So, with that in mind, my concern is this. Each time we have a rally, and we get people to come to ground to demand of UMNO BN these reforms, we are implicitly being dishonest in that we are perhaps suggesting to the public that they might still give us those reforms. Now, I've long believed it will never happen. And increasingly, I cannot see them giving us those reforms. And it was for that reason that I finally said, I've got to step out. That's one. Number two, this issue keeps cropping up again and again. We have to be non-partisan. I think that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous given what we know. And for instance, if you take the initiative that Bersih came up with to go down again to the Malay heartland, Jom 100, which was an effort to get 100% voter attendance. You go down to the kampongs and you present to them the litany of UMNO BN sins in the elections. And you know, they listen to you and they say, okay, we see your point. Now, who should we vote for? And you apply bricks and say, whoa, we are non-partisan, so we can't say the Abu word. That's crazy. Now, I quit Bersih because I felt if I'm a civil society leader, then I owe the truth to the public. You talk about state apparatus, will they harass it? Well, they've harassed before, it's not worth. You talk about the law of sedition. Aristotle said if the law is bad, break it, so we'll continue to break it. If this is seditious, I will continue to be seditious. And I'm not the only one. And trust me, there are, and this is the beauty of the Malaysians at home, the young. You take away Haris, there are others coming up. You take away Cik Ubat, there are others coming up. There are Adam Adlis, there are hundreds of Adam Adlis waiting to come up. So they can use the state apparatus, we're not afraid. Radio Free Malaysia. As I said, the only time I listen to the radio is when I'm stuck in the traffic. So yes, whilst it's there, you may have people listening to it, but again, our target has to be the Malay heartlands. The question on whether we will take these issues to the Indians and the Chinese. I can understand why Najib said it was a Chinese tsunami. The Chinese swing was near total. Even notwithstanding that, Abu did come out with material to deal with Chua Soy Lake's play on the Islamic State. But you know, we take it into the Chinese new villages and they say what? Ayah Haris, tak payahlah, no need, go and spend your time in the kampongs. The Chinese swing was near total. Having said that, I agree, we should not be complacent. And we will continue to monitor, and as and when that movie star Chua Soy Lake comes up with any other issues, we will tackle them on the ground. The Indian vote, yes, there was a swing, an anticipated swing in some 24 constituencies. Whether it was related or connected to Vaidamurti and Hindraf's going mainstream is being analyzed now. But certainly as we move along, whilst the Malays in the heartlands are our priority, we will not leave any stone unturned. The diaspora in Singapore, I think, is slightly less than that, 700,000 strong. Hong Kong has about something like 22,000. We intend to reach out all. I've said this in Canberra, I've said this in Melbourne, and I'm going to say this today in Sydney. Do not underestimate the power that you have. Now, I gave one example in Melbourne. You take the race, religion rhetoric that's driving through our media today. There's nothing to stop the good people of Sydney coming together, putting together a memorandum of concern at what is being articulated by Dr. Mahathir, by Ibrahim Ali, by Zaid Hamidi, Home Minister. This is atrocious. In any other jurisdiction, he would be asked to resign. Now, there's nothing to stop you getting this memorandum together, taking it to the Malaysian High Commission, taking it to your Member of Parliament, and saying, why is the government of Australia not protesting and condemning what is panning out there? Now, in the same way, the people of Melbourne, the people of Canberra, the Malaysians in Tokyo, the Malaysians in Singapore, and collectively, you will bring international pressure to bear on the government. Now, we've seen the amendments to the Prevention of Crime Act. which has surreptitiously brought in the equivalent of the ISA. And I am told by my friends, the commerce in UMNO, Haris, very soon you're home. I don't care. But again, the diaspora can rise to condemn and to remind Najib of his promise of a slew of reforms, which are all now just forgotten. In the run-up to the elections, Abu was most ably assisted by the public at home and abroad with funding. We got over $1 million. And we've been transparent. If you go to my blog, the accounts have been audited with almost 543,000 still in the hands.
12 cents.
And 12 cents. And the Abu volunteers have a reason for that. They say Haris is a stingy git. Haris is a stingy git. I am. When it comes to public money, I am. So you've helped us out with funding. But I'll tell you this, friends, that's the lowest denominator, money. What we need is people standing up, home and abroad, in solidarity with us. And you can. Do not discount the formidable role you can play in righting the many wrongs at home.
Now, three more. There was someone up here at the back, yes. Women at the back there, and someone here, and then over there.
Am I the one in the back, or is there someone
No, that's you. That's you. Sorry. In the middle.
You are, madam.
You, madam. It's you with the blue. Oh, microphone, please.
Considering that the power is, and the cronyism is at the top, I guess we have to fight the top. But what worries me about that is that they've also got the arms. So what's going to happen to opposition in the streets? And they're going to be slaughtered. And also, not being Malaysian, I wonder whether you could tell me what UMNO stands for.
Okay.
And the gentleman in the third row. Yeah. Microphones. Have you? No, shut down.
Sweet.
Yeah, yeah.
Alice, I have read your message before. I don't want to repeat what the other gentleman said. You know, with the diaspora, I think you mentioned that I don't think, I myself am Australian now, I don't think it's right for us to enjoy the privilege of this country and get this country to cite us for something which is really outside of this country now. I think it's not fair. But I think we can still do as Malaysian. Of course, we are born and bred over this country, and we really appreciate what we've gone through. But one thing, when Rafizi was here, I don't want to mention my background. I think 2 months, when he left here, I wrote him an email from my experience. I said he should saturate the campaign. Mainly, to win a campaign is either you push your opponent over the hill, say the bad thing about it, and say all the good thing about the candidate. I told him that it's saturation. You mentioned saturation. I don't think he has done that. I've sent him the email, I think he didn't read it. Now, I think that's a very good thing, but as I listen to other people, he can be very, very not effective. You know, I know Malay quite well, as you are. You know, they say a lot of things in a mosque. They said a lot of things in a kampong. It's not easy to sway them. Now, I will have this to say only. money talks a lot in Malaysia. Whether you gentlemen believe it or not, I feel it's no use to stir up this Abu thing, Bersih thing. A lot of people here, even my friend here, feels the only way to take over Putrajaya is to the arm, to bloodshed, which I'm against, saying no, 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 no. That's not the way to do it. What you have said obviously makes a lot of sense, but it's very hard. It's like climbing Mount Everest. My suggestion is this: money talks. Now, is it possible to freeze the money from all the mover and shaker, ill-gotten money from the politician? Now, can we have a class action, a diaspora, a class action to freeze the money of all these people who were ill-gotten money in overseas accounts? This is how I look at it. Then maybe if they don't have the money, they will not be able to do a lot. And of course, with money from outside diaspora, we can support you in publication, in saturation. I think will be more helpful than stirring everybody really hot and cold and get somebody to go for a very unpleasant bloodshed. This is how this is my opinion.
Could you please pass to your left, Mark? You'll be in the next round. Okay? Next round.
Thanks. Very inspiring, Harris. Maybe a few lessons for us here about getting information out to people who rely on AM commercial radio or the newspapers of Rupert Murdoch as their only source of information in Australia. I guess I wanted to ask you a question, about links that we can make as Australian activists here with what's going on in Malaysia. There's two. I know obviously there's been the stuff about Australian corporations like Linus who get the tick of approval from UMNO and all their cronies, but also going back to the issue that you raised at the start, Tony Abbott's apology about criticising their human rights records. He was always very selective about that because obviously he thought the human rights record of Nauru and Papua New Guinea was okay to send asylum seekers to. And I went in 2011 and met a whole range of refugee support groups in Malaysia who formed a bit of a coalition against what the Australian government was trying to do. So I guess, are there other avenues, that we can, speaking as a non-Malay, that we can raise to put pressure, I guess, on our own government and their sort of foreign policy priorities that they have? Because I think in a lot of ways they rely on the ongoing authoritarianism in Malaysia to sort of pursue their own interests as well.
Madam, if I understood your question correctly, they not only hold the wealth, the government, but any street protests or any attempts at taking arms on the streets would be met with the arms. I assume you are referring to the security forces now, right? Now, just to share with you all, in the run-up to the 13 GP, our intelligence reports that came back, the police in the south, Johor, had swung. The police in the south, in Johor, had swung. All right, now, let me explain this. One of the biggest issues that we took to the ground and which resonated was the rising cost of living. Everybody feels that. The pinch in the pocket. Now the copper, the private who's on traffic beat can stop your car and say, you were speeding, you were doing 90 in a 70 per km zone. Slip me a fiver and the matter's closed. But the boys in the military don't have that option. They don't have that opportunity to augment their income. And they feel the pinch. Civil servants, the rank and file, today, pack food from home and take to work because they can't afford to go to the stores. It's a serious issue on the ground. We, in Abu, launched our initiative to the military and the police. And the message was simply this: we're fighting for your kids too. and if the order comes to shoot, think about who you want to shoot. All right? Now, this is part of cyber. When Najib's regime, when UMNO understands that we've taken something like 2 million of those flyers out into the military bases, into the police barracks, you do not know when you hit the button if the projectile is going to fly. You do not know whether that campaign has had its desired effect. And truth be told, we too won't until we are on the streets. Then we'll find out if it's had its impact. Now that's just half the story. The other half is this. UMNO BN counts on us fearing the retaliation and the brutality on the street. In that sense, I suppose Bersih 1, 2, 3 and the ISA rallies are something that perhaps the policing forces have never seen before. That we've got beaten and we've come back. And perhaps Bersih 2, Bersih 3, there was retaliation. As I said, a pacifist people will only take so much. So, is there the risk of brutality and arms and bloodshed? We don't ask for it. If we take to the streets, we will take it in a Gandhian stance. But we don't promise that we'll continue to remain that way. And you may fight us with your guns. We'll fight them with our spirit. That's all we have. Abu in Malay is asalkan bukan UMNO, and it translates beautifully into English using still ABU. It's anything but UMNO. and you know, it's funny, even in the 12GE, this is Malaysian the kampung thing, give me a monkey and UMNO, I'll take the monkey. Looking at some of the opposition, I think they just did, they took monkeys. Class action. You want to take a class action? I'm pretty sure you didn't mean filing suits in Kuala Lumpur.
Outside.
Yeah, because the only courts we have in there are the kangaroo kind.
Yeah.
You can try. You can try. I think the scope for creativity outside is limitless. You know, and I think that's an excellent suggestion to freeze their assets. But I think information is scarce. You need those details. Lawyers will tell you that the courts will not entertain a fishing expedition. So unless you have ironclad facts before you, that you know Musa Aman and Taib Mahmud have got these accounts here and these are details, you won't be able to get court orders to disclose. But if that evidence and that information is available, I think that's an excellent move. Now, funding for our cause back home. I said this just now and I'll say it again, funding is the lowest denominator. But you're right, it's a reality. Fighting a media war is expensive. We will be dependent on funding both from home and abroad. Yes, help us in any way that you can. I was merely pointing out that don't take out your checkbook, sign it, and send us a check and think, okay, I've done my part. That's the lowest bit. That's the lowest bit. Be our international watchdogs. The question of what other links? Could you be more precise? What precisely do you need?
Well, I don't know. I guess I was trying to brainstorm whether you have other ideas. I mean, my passion is with the asylum seeker issue at the moment, and human rights and so on. But if you had other suggestions, I don't know, or comment about how that issue is being treated in Malaysia, for example.
I've got to confess that the last 1.5 months, we have been on the ground. We have been on the ground, and we have been very focused on evaluating what really went wrong in G13. So I've not had my mind turned to other issues. But if you go to my blog, The People's Parliament, there's an email me link, and I'll be happy to brainstorm this with you and see where and what issues we can take further. I'll be very happy to.
Yes, in the yellow.
First of all, Harris, I like to express my admiration for you. If I were a Malay and a Muslim like you in Malaysia, you could have joined UMNO, and you could be worth a few $100 million now, and with a very comfortable lifestyle, and don't have to worry about being arrested by the special branch of every day of your life. Now, having brought up in the Malay village, and when you had Malay friends when I was young, I believe that for Malaysians to change government, you need to understand a few things. First of all, you need to understand the psyche of the Malays in the kampong, in the villages. Because to the traditional, the typical Malay folks, three things are the most important to them. As Raja Petra Kamarudin, RPK, has written, the three R's. What he calls it: race, religion, and royalty. And I believe the opposition politicians, including the DAP politicians, do not understand this. Give you an example. A few weeks before the GE13, Lim Guan Eng played up the Allah issue. What for? The DAP were expected to win in all their seats. Right. So why did he have to raise the Allah issue? We saw what happened after that. Past suffered, past went backwards, because to the Malay folks, when there's an attack on their race and religion, especially religion, they will not compromise. They will swing back to UMNO. So what I'm trying to say is, it's better that the politicians in the DAP, or even some in the PKR, firstly got to understand the psyche, the thinking of the Malay folks, because that's where all the battles are going to be won, not in the urban seats. As you know, the gerrymander, one voter in the kampongs is worth something like 3 or 4 or 5 in the urban seats. And secondly, I would say that to win, and this is what I know Ibrahim has been telling everybody, that to win the elections, the oppositions got to do very, very well in Sabah to start with, and later on Sarawak. That did not translate. The plan did not work. Why? Because of too much infighting. And I don't know the nitty-gritties of why so much infighting. Then maybe we got ambitious people that don't take lead. It screws up everything. So, unfortunately, I share your pessimism. Malaysia is a basket case. And I've got no idea how are we going to change it. Perhaps we need another 50 years when the country is really down the drain. We have a revolution there. But apart from that, you're fighting against a government that's got billions of dollars, or rather a party, but there's no difference between UMNO and government. The government is UMNO, UMNO is the government. Now they have billions of dollars at their disposal. And you've got so many corrupt politicians here. So how are we going to change it? You can have demonstrations every day. They don't care. They just arrest you. Sorry to say that, my father was in the police force before he retired. So I don't know how they work. They just kind of arrest you in the middle of the night. And many of the other Malaysians will just run away. You're going to be left with a few $100,000 to fight the whole government, the whole country. So how is it going to work? I'm very pessimistic. I'm sorry to say that. I think we need a few more years of critical thinking and planning.
Can I take this?
Okay, it's so important it's going to take this. Okay.
I'd like to take this first before we get to the next question. Now, first of all, I'm not pessimistic. If I was pessimistic, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you. All right? I'm not. I've got to continue to believe that there are enough good people at home and abroad who care enough, and that we will, God willing, make a difference. I completely agree with you that the opposition showed total incompetence in coming up with a plan to unify all opposing forces, not just the opposition parties, all opposing forces. I can share with you that some of the top leaders had great reluctance in working with AMU. I mean, with a name like Anything But UMNO, it's bizarre. I would get full cooperation with those at mid and lower level. I would get full cooperation with candidates. Candidates were knocking on our doors to say, can we have your material? Can we have your eagles to do the walkabout? And we had great success. And I'll tell you why. It's very simple. Psychologically, it's very simple. If you go to a BN ceramah, a campaign, election campaign, you expect to hear Pakatan bashing. And if you went to a Pakatan campaign rally, you'd expect to hear BN bashing. So listeners say we take a pinch of salt with what we're hearing there. But when you have civil society people come to you in the coffee shops, come to you in the farms, we had access to Felda. Opposition couldn't get into Felda. We got into Felda. Why? Because we said we're not from the political parties. We are rakyat coming to you with a message. And once they were convinced, or they believed that we were not from political parties, they wanted to hear what we had to say. And our message was simply this: yes, from what we know, we are convinced UMNO BN must go. What we want to present to you is the same information to leave you to decide for yourself. And some of them, when they criticize Pakatan, we say we're not Pakatan supporters. But this is important. If we are able to remove BN, what we have learned is power is with the people. And if we can remove BN today, we can remove Pakatan tomorrow. When I was on the campaign trail, I brought this up. Pakatan had promised us reforms in 100 days if they took Putrajaya. And I said it was unrealistic. I said we would give them 200 days. That's double the time you have said. But I said if you fail, see us on the streets. So this is not something that we just took to BN. We said we are not voting Pakatan because we love you. You get our vote by default. Because we so despise the politics of UMNO Barisan Nasional. You have not done enough to endear yourselves to us. Now, I'll be honest, I've said this before, I'll say this again. Pakatan Rakyat by itself cannot bring BN down. They need to work a union with the political parties of Sabah and Sarawak. And yes, you said it. Sabah and Sarawak are critical to bringing UMNO BN down in Putrajaya. But post 13 GE, I walked away from it convinced that I cannot look to the politicians to lead us to the promised land. I cannot. I'll give you this one instance to sustain what I say. The minimum wage. Parti Socialist Malaysia, Parti Rakyat Malaysia, NGOs, NGIs, myself, we have been pushing for 1,005, which, my friends, is really the barest minimum that you need to give to the poor. BN says no, 900 ringgit. Pakatan says no, 1,001. But they both sing the same mantra as to why they cannot give us 1,005. Why? They say if we give you 1,005, we will kill the small and medium industries. And Southern Bank sent back the forms and said, this is improper. I said, so was your question. The point I'm making is this. It's down to us. You know, you want to change something, it's down to us. To deliver to them that which was bargained for. But my fear is if we leave it to the politicians, hell will freeze over first. So it is in that regard that I say we look to a civil society leader to set the charge to bring down UMNO BN in Putrajaya. Now, what sort of work in Sabah and Sarawak? If I start to get into the nitty-gritties, it would be akin to actually putting up our blueprint in neon lights for UMNO BN to see. Trust me, I do not have to be on the ground there. We have operatives. Let me just say, put it this way. PAS has a very good program on the ground. They call it Anak Angkat. They go in and they actually work to get themselves sort of living in somebody's house, somebody's kampong, so that they can exert their sphere of influence. Now, when you get into the most impoverished areas in Sabah, two items that are essential to them for their daily use, but which is expensive, is cooking oil and sugar. All right. Now, in many of the impoverished areas, not just in Malaysia, but even in other countries, you remember when we were in school, kids, the ice cream that was sold in that little plastic, all right? Okay, so what happens is sugar and cooking oil is also sold like that, so that it's small enough to be sold cheaply. But even that, some people can't afford. Now, if you can set up a network of little kiosks where those are sold, and you allow them to put it in the 3-5 exercise book as an IOU, you get your foot into the doorway. All right? But it has to be done under the radar. Once they start to befriend you, you then take out the plastic foldable table with the stools, and you now start to also sell teh tarik and roti bakar with the 3-5 exercise book, and you start to win them over. Friends, this works. On the ground, this works. The guy who helps you get the cooking oil and the sugar is your friend. All right, and when you start to talk to him about, actually, why is it you don't get enough pay? The minister, then you start to open up. And then, if you have the chance, you have a little small TV with a video player, and you start to play the videos, and it works. It works. Okay, it's crude though the tools may seem. That's how you get the message into the heartland. Okay, so we will be getting, I don't have to be physically there. We have our operators on the ground. Are we finished with Q&A?
Yeah, we finished with Q&A.
Okay.
If you want to make a last comment.
Sure. I'm told that we have no more time for Q&A and that I have the last hurrah. Again, I want to say thank you so much. This is in fact my last leg. I fly back tomorrow. This is in fact my first trip to Australia. I'll tell you, it won't be my last, as long as they give me a visa. Cheers, mate. I'm so happy. I am so happy to meet my Malaysian. Well, when I was at the dinner at Sydney, somebody rebuked me and said, "I'm no more Malaysian. I'm now Australian. Stop calling me Malaysian." Well, you can take a Malaysian out of Malaysia. You can never take the Malaysia out of him. You can't. I am so happy to see so many of you who have come out here, and I'm sure for many of you it's been a struggle. But it's good to see you doing well. I just want to tell you this. It's my closing story. In 2008, in Selayang, which is fairly urban, a young Malay boy aged 12 was running into disciplinary problems in school. He was constantly missing the last lesson. He had been put through disciplinary action one after the other, but it continued. Finally, the headmaster called him up and said, "Unless you have a good reason, you're being expelled today." Now, this is not something I contrive in order to get you all teary-eyed. The boy broke down and he told the headmaster this. He said he has to run, he climbs over the school fence and he runs home, which is nearby, so that his older brother can take the school uniform and the shoes to attend the afternoon session. This is in an oil-producing country, a rich country. For every one of you out here, there are 12 at home. You cannot break out of that system. And if we won't help them, no one else will. Thank you.
Friends, I'm sure you will agree this was a very inspiring and provocative talk by Haris here. So once again, yes. And now even although you breathed our beautiful smoky air this morning. Yeah, so thank you, and also thank to everybody here for coming, because you know what he said was very brave, and in some ways we're not used to hearing such outspoken thing, but everybody's brave to come here as well. Once upon a time, Malaysians were too scared to come and listen to even a more, let's say, a more cautious talk. But times are changing, and this is part of the proof. Now, Helen would like to say this.
Yeah, I just want to say, I understand, Haris, you said you've left Bersih. For all of us here in Sydney, I just want to say that that doesn't mean you discourage if some of us who still want to make our solidarity with all our people back home when they do go to any other Bersih rally that is being organized, that we please do come out and support, because I think that's right. Bersih was 2 and 3 was about reform, and you're saying it's never going to happen, so you've left Bersih. But I think a lot of us, you know, like Peter says, like the people at home who never thought they would ever attend a rally, they did so because they want change. Yes, the reforms were wanted, but they want change. And I think to leave that behind now, because you've got 4 years to go before the next one, and for you to say that will be black Bersih, may send out the message that it's not worth it. And I think it's still worth it. A lot of us here who flew home to vote only did that because we were so inspired by what happened for Bersih at home. You know, so we flew home to vote. So we mustn't stop that, I think. We mustn't say that the rallies are only for reform. It's not going to happen, and therefore, you know, we should just forget about it. I think if Bersih 4 comes about, I think the 250,000 will come to 300, 400,000. It doesn't matter, they're all urban voters, but sooner or later, the small towns in Kedah, Perak, Pahang will be influenced by what happens in Kuala Lumpur. Those of us in Sydney, New York, Abu Dhabi will fly home to vote, and our vote counts. So I'm just saying that we should, and we ask all of you who are already Australians, you still come to whatever rallies we organize in Sydney, because it sends a message back to those at home. It sends a message to students here who may fly home to vote, and to all of us too can fly home to vote.
Yes, thanks. I think we should take that as thanks to the Sydney Bersih Committee who's actually organised this meeting, and it's our ongoing forceful organisation here. And a reminder, please leave your email address to the Sydney Bersih Committee if you would like to stay in touch. Now, final reminder, please check around you and take out all the cups and bottles of water and drinks. We have to really clean this out. We have to be out here in 5 minutes. So I'm sorry to cut things short.
I have 20 seconds just to clarify. 20 seconds.
Where's the microphone? I
got a judge. 20 seconds just to clarify. I gave the impression that I thought Bersih was unimportant or irrelevant. I apologize. That was not my purpose. That was my intention. Understand that I left Bersih because I felt I needed to be honest with the public. I needed to be honest with the public who listened to me. I could no longer say, go to the rallies to ask for reforms. We can still go to the rallies and say, get out of Putrajaya. One. Number two, more important, I felt that there was a need for a strong voice. A strong voice. And I felt I played a better role outside of Bersih. But I continue to support Bersih in their efforts. Thank you.